In the beginning, there was no empire, no marble, no legions marching beneath crimson banners. There was only a quiet river and the soft rise of 7 hills. The land around the Tiber was wild, raw, tangled with forests and marshes where shepherds guided their flocks and traders moved slowly with their goods. They did not yet imagine that this place, humble, muddy, almost insignificant, would someday command the known world. Rome began not with glory, but with danger, hunger, and uncertainty. The oldest stories whispered about 2 infants left to die in a basket on the riverbank, their cries carried by the wind until a she-wolf came to them. Whether that truly happened mattered less than what people believed. The Romans believed that their founders were children who survived abandonment, who grew strong through hardship, who were raised by something wild. One twin rose above the other, not through kindness, but through force. Romulus killed Remus in a dispute over boundaries, a violence that would echo in Rome's future. Romulus then traced a line in the earth and claimed it as the beginning of his city. In reality, Rome's early days were no more than a handful of huts, smoke rising from small fires, and families who clung to existence in a land of rival tribes. Those tribes, Latins, Sabines, Etruscans, fought constantly. Honor and survival were the same thing. Early Rome was ruled by kings, some more myth than man, others remembered for the structures they built or the laws they formed. One king was said to have invited gods into the rhythm of daily life, creating rituals, priests, calendars, and offerings that bound the people together. Another king expanded the settlement, dug trenches, built walls, and led armies into battle. The Etruscan rulers brought new engineering, stone temples, paved streets, drainage systems that turned swamps into usable land. Rome grew because every new ruler added something: discipline, religion, warfare, or construction. But the last king ruled like a tyrant. His son committed a crime so vile against a noblewoman that the people rose in fury. The Romans vowed never again to accept a king. They overthrew the monarchy and swore that power would never rest in one man's hands. A republic was formed, governed by elected leaders who shared authority for only a single year. Senators, elders from prominent families, offered advice and shaped policy. Assemblies of citizens voted on laws. It was an experiment in balancing ambition with restraint, but it was imperfect from the beginning. The wealthy held nearly all power. The poor had little voice.
Those challenges arrived quickly. Rome's neighbors attacked often, and Rome struck back with equal force. To the north were the Etruscans, skilled and wealthy. To the east, the Sabines and Samnites, fierce mountain warriors who excelled in rough terrain. For decades, Rome fought these enemies, sometimes losing entire armies, but never the will to continue. The Samnites humiliated a Roman force by surrounding them in a mountain pass and forcing them to surrender without a fight. The defeated soldiers were made to walk under a wooden yoke in shame, a memory that burned deeply into Roman pride. Rome responded by restructuring its military. The legions became more flexible, faster, more ruthless. Roads were built to move soldiers quickly across the peninsula. Cities were turned into allies instead of enemies. Rome granted some rights to those who fought alongside her, creating a network of loyalty that stretched across Italy. Little by little, Rome absorbed the peninsula. And when the last major Italian rivals fell, Rome looked outward across the Mediterranean and realized it had grown powerful enough to attract the attention of distant enemies. Across the sea lay Carthage, a wealthy trading empire with ships that ruled the waves and colonies spread from Africa to Spain. When Rome intervened in a Sicilian dispute, the two giants clashed in what became the First Punic War. Rome had almost no navy, but desperation bred innovation. They copied a Carthaginian ship that washed ashore, built an entire fleet, and turned sea battles into infantry combat by attaching boarding bridges to enemy vessels. After decades of struggle, Rome emerged victorious, claiming Sicily as its first overseas province. Carthage paid dearly, but remained a threat. It was during the second conflict, the war that followed a generation later, that the world learned the name Hannibal Barca. A general of rare brilliance, he gathered troops and war elephants and crossed the Alps, something no one believed could be done. Snowstorms, rock slides, tribal attacks, and starvation destroyed many of his men, but the survivors descended into Italy like a storm. Hannibal crushed Roman armies again and again. At Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, and finally at Cannae, he demonstrated tactics that are still studied thousands of years later. At Cannae, he surrounded a much larger Roman army and annihilated it. Tens of thousands died in a single day. Rome was shaken to its core. Yet Rome refused to surrender. The Republic drew on its vast manpower, raised new legions, and adopted a strategy of refusing direct battle. A young commander named Scipio took the fight to Spain, then crossed into Africa itself. Carthage panicked and recalled Hannibal. On the plains near Zama, the two commanders faced each other. Scipio's reforms and cavalry alliances proved decisive. Hannibal was defeated, and Carthage was forced to give up its empire, its fleet, and much of its wealth. Though weakened, it still existed, an existence that irritated Rome like a lingering wound. 50 years later, Rome destroyed it completely. Flames consumed the city. The survivors were sold into slavery. Carthage was erased. With the Mediterranean under Roman control, wealth poured into the Republic, but prosperity brought corruption. Senators enriched themselves with land seized from conquered territories. Enslaved people were forced to work huge estates, while small farmers lost their livelihoods. The city of Rome swelled with displaced citizens looking for work, relying on free grain and hoping for political reform. Two brothers tried to help, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They sought to redistribute land to the poor and restore opportunity to ordinary Romans. Their efforts were met with hatred from the elite. Both died violently, murdered by political opponents who feared losing their wealth. Their deaths marked a turning point. Violence became accepted as a tool of politics. Once blood was shed in the Forum, it became easier to shed it again. Ambitious generals rose to fill the widening cracks in the Republic. Gaius Marius, a man of humble origin, reformed the army by recruiting the landless poor. Soldiers now served for pay and land, binding them to their commanders rather than to the state. Marius won great victories and immense popularity, but his allied-turned-rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, marched his army into Rome itself, the first Roman general to do so. Civil war erupted. Sulla seized power, executed his enemies, and appointed himself dictator. He rewrote the constitution to strengthen the Senate and limit the tribunes. When Sulla retired, the Republic seemed restored, but underneath the surface, it had changed forever. Soldiers now believed more in their generals than in the state. Politicians learned that force could win arguments better than speeches. Greed, ambition, and fear spread like cracks across marble. And waiting in the chaos was a new generation of men whose names would tower over history. Pompey the Great, wealthy and victorious, Crassus, richest man in Rome, and Julius Caesar, bold, charming, and deeply ambitious. Together, they would push the Republic to its breaking point and reshape the world in ways no one could yet imagine.